KSI, British YouTuber, worldwide YouTuber at this point. It feels like he's been around since ever. I remember being a teenager, a young teenager, and my friends talking about this guy on YouTube, watching his videos, sharing memes that he was doing before memes were really, you know, memes. And it wasn't something I was into, never really cared for that kind of like YouTube personality thing, ironically, which is, you know, funny because I'm technically in that crowd now. Obviously a very different lane of videos, but you know, he's obviously done very well for himself. He's even a boxer at this point. He's tried to, you know, dabble in the music industry. It's almost like YouTubers these days start as one thing and then just pursue their interests once they become super famous, super worldwide, because everything they do gets attention. He even says that at one point on this album. So I think KSI is playing the game. He's playing the money-making scheme very well. He knows how to get attention and is now, you know, making his way into the UK charts with his singles. Pretty kind of crazy, honestly. It's not his first rodeo though. He has already put out music before, and it seems like this time around, this album here is dabbling in way more mainstream trends, pop friendly trends, radio friendly trends. Not to say that he's selling out or anything like that. I don't even know if someone as famous as this could sell out to begin with, honestly, but he's certainly tapping in to a market that I think is widely accessible amongst UK general listeners, UK music audiences. These tracks could easily be found in clubs across the country. Aptly titled All Over the Place is very much all over the place with its styles. We've got pop tracks on here, we've got garage fusions as well. He's not quite touching or tapping into any grime, but there are some tracks that feel like he's trying to emulate a bit of those influences that are coming through, a bit of trap coming through as well. He is pretty much touching all bases, honestly. With varying degrees of success, I think one of the biggest drawbacks of KSI is his voice. He probably would admit himself, actually, that he isn't a great vocalist, which is why he slathers so much friggin' auto-tune on so many of these tracks. And like I say, varying degrees of success. This is not very flattering, to be honest. It immediately starts as being very unflattering with the opening track where his vocals sound extremely rough. Pair that with really like weak lines, like Cold Like an Eskimo and the Jerry Maguire thing that he's got going on here. It's pretty much a poor tone setter for the album. I was not looking forward to hearing the rest of this as soon as this track came on. And then you get number 2 coming after it, which once again has these vocals that just sound atrocious, and the lines that he throws out here again, you know, with the shit now, you're number 2. Come on, man. It's just really weak. I don't think he, again, is trying to present himself as like this amazing lyricist or anything like that. Of course, there are some artists out there that I like that aren't great lyricists, but I just think sometimes these lines stand out really poorly. Now, speaking of bad vocals, I was expecting to come on this review and say that the Youngblood feature was going to be even worse than what we were getting from KSI's vocals, because usually Youngblood is horrendous in my opinion in terms of his vocals, but somehow he doesn't end up ruining the track. In fact, I think he actually improves the song by just bringing this really boisterous and energetic chorus that just really shines in a strange way. It just kind of highlights how some of these tracks could potentially sound if you know, picked out different vocalists to do different things. I think, like I say, like, usually the biggest issue is KSI himself, but the production is usually all right. So I think, again, if you just replaced KSI on some of these tracks, you might be getting some really good songs. It's got a summery pop beat. I think this one's all right. I was surprised, actually, and it doesn't include as much, you know, auto-tune KSI. So again, really goes to show when you take away some of those poor elements, you get a decent track. You is a bit cringe. I find this one a little bit icky with the lyrics, just very generic cliche stuff about this girl that he's after, and you know, he's trying to talk about her in a really positive way. Just comes across a bit blech. It's got an odd beat too. It doesn't really match very well with his voice. There's some kind of weird dichotomy going on here between his voice and the beat. KSI, when he's not slathering himself in autotune, has this really like deep gruff voice that can sound a bit weird when he's trying to sing, and matching it with this instrumental just is a bit of an eyesore, honestly. You get moments like Madness, which I mentioned before, where he's trying to emulate some of his peers in the UK rap game by bringing out this like hype, energetic performance on the chorus. Does it work? No, I don't think. He sounds a bit awkward, honestly. He just is throwing out really weak lines again that just make it hard to pass. I think really here, where he says like grab me like Atlas. However though, No Pressure actually ends up being one of the best tracks for me, because I don't think KSI is sounding too out of place here with his voice or anything like that, like I've said on a few of the other tracks where he's a bit out of place. Yeah, sure, there's pretty typical money bragging lines here. Obviously, he's got a lot to brag about, considering how famous he is at this point. He's talking about, you know, once again, unrequited love, talking about another girl on this track. Very typical stuff, but I think he actually is just riding this beat quite nicely. And again, I think the instrumental itself is just probably the best and most enjoyable on the whole album. Don't Play has Anne-Marie, who again is another mainstream name to add to his album here. Actually adds an okay chorus, even if the lyrics aren't really too good. Don't play games with my heart, now the feels hit differently. Honestly, anyone that says feels in just passing conversation is gonna have to reevaluate things. I just hate that word, man. In the feels. I'm just in my feelings, my feels. Surprisingly, has a very prototypical garage beat. You'd find this in 2000s garage type music, which kind of got revived in the 2010s. Again, an enjoyable beat here, pretty standard for what it is, but I think he actually sounds like he's, you know, in good hands on this track. He doesn't sound out of place, not throwing out these weird auto-tune things. The chorus is okay. This was actually in the charts, like I say. He's getting a bit of mainstream attention, and you could see why a song like this would make its way into a club or into the charts. Really Love has some of the funniest or unintentionally funniest lines on the whole thing, where he says, don't cook but my chef like Ainsley. Shout out to Ainsley, man. What a British treasure he is. And then he says, wrecking my balls, Miley. Definitely one of the best, worst lyrics of the year. It's one of the worst and one of the best of the year. It's both. It's simultaneously both of those things. This track has another big name on it for British music, Craig David. Not really keen on his chorus. I actually think Craig David has aged quite well in terms of his biggest hits, and even today is putting out some good tracks too. But he's just so saccharine on this one. The sweetness of this chorus, of the lyrics he's saying and how he's singing it, is just once again a bit icky, kind of like the track You, where the lyrics are just a bit too much. Not really keen on it, but I think, you know, some of the lines in the verses are pretty funny, so it's not a terrible song or anything like that. Certainly not as terrible as Sleeping with the Enemy. I can't stand this one. I think the lyrics are shite, to be quite frank. I think the whole thing he's talking about at the start, he's just talking nonsense, really, about his, you know, about how he's quitting school and how his mum doesn't want him to quit school, and I don't know, man, I just don't know what he's talking about, and the chorus just sounds really Feature on this one doesn't have a bad voice, but there's something about the voice that just doesn't work with me at all. I just think the instrumental is so like happy, yaddy-daddy-daddy. Just not a fan of this track at all. And there are different editions of this album. I think this is the closing track on the original version, but there is also a different version which has this track Holiday on it. For what it's worth, I may as well explain that I don't really like that track either. once again, for a similar reason, there's this kind of like sunshiny feel to this one. Just not really keen on it. It actually reminds me of Sun Goes Down by Lil Nas X. For what it's worth, that track is much better than Holiday here. So yeah, just like a very mixed bag, basically. There's a lot to kind of take away as like, oh, KSI is kind of heading in the right direction with some of the production ideas here. You know, I haven't mentioned every track, but most of these tracks sound okay in terms of the music, but it's usually just KSI himself that's just putting a damp like all over these songs with his voice, with his lyrics. Some of the choruses not really that great. It's really hard to rate this one because I can kind of see where he's heading, but at the moment I'm just not sure if what he's providing is any good. I think generally I know that I don't like this album, but I'm just struggling to say at what extent I don't like it. I can't really quite call it bad, but do I want to go back to it? No, not really. Usually I find it easy to just rate an album, but this time around it's a bit tricky. I think what I'll go with here is a 5 out of 10. I think it's somewhere in the middle. There are moments that I think work, there are tracks that I think are pretty good, but just the overall product, I think KSI has got a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot to improve here, you know. Something with the vocals needs to change. The lyrical themes, something about those are just not quite there either. Yeah, I don't know. It's not an album I'm going to go back to, basically. But yeah, a weird one, because, like I say, some of these tracks have elements that I like, but just overall there's something stopping them from being really good. So thank you for watching this review. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you have a good day. And if you haven't already subscribed, I do hope you hit the subscribe button. That would be fantastic. Check out my Patreon in the description as well. That would be great. See you soon. Have a good day and goodbye.